DoD Directive 540007, Department of Defense Freedom of Information Program Office's Chief Management Officer of the Department of Defense, April 5th, 2019, clear for public release, available the Directive Division ESDWHS MIL DD. Department Directive 540007, the Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act Program, October 28, 2005, Dr. L. Nurquist, performing duties Deputy Secretary Director. Issuance established policy assigning responsibility for the Department of Defense Freedom of Information Program in accordance with Section 552, Title 5 United States Code, as amended, also known, referred to in the Issuance of Freedom of Information Act. Table of Contents, General Issuance, Information Advocacy Policy, Information Collections, Chief Management Officer of the Department of Defense, Director, Director of Oversight Compliance, Director of Washington Headquarters Services, General Counsel for the Department of Defense, Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act Program Components Head, Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act Program Components Head, except for combat commanders. Glossary A, document, acronyms, definitions. Hold on a second. The DoD Freedom of Information Act program, while remaining constant, DoD responsibility. Policy, Department of Defense Freedom of Information Program, while remaining consistent with the Department of Defense responsibility, protection, national security, other sensitive information, promotes transparency, accountability, adopts and presumption favor disclosure, all release decisions involving freedom of information, responding promptly, Freedom of Information Act request, spirit, cooperation, in accordance with procedure establishing by 286 Title 32 Code of Regulation, DoD Manual 540007, provide DoD records requests by members of the public unless these records are accepted for disclosure in accordance with Section B of the Freedom of Information Act. Work with the Office of the General Government Information Services to resolve the dispute between Freedom of Information Act requester and the Department of Defense. Nothing in the directive will be construed infringed with the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Defense statutory independence authority pursuant to the Inspector General 1978 is amended with the Title 5 United States Code of Appendix. Information collection with the Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act annual report are referred to in paragraph 2.1c as assigned report court symbol DCMO A 1365 in accordance with procedure volume 1, Department of Defense 89-10-01. Section 2, Responsibility, Chief Management Officer of the Department of Defense, Chief of DoD, Chief of Freedom of Information Officer in accordance with Section JK of the Freedom of Information Act, Director oversees DoD Freedom of Information Act program to ensure compliance, policy, and procedures governing the program, submit the Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act annual report, other reports required by Section E, Freedom of Information Act, Attorney General of the United States. Except for the DoD critical infrastructure security information from release under Freedom of Information Act pursuant to Section 130E, Title 10 United States Code, except information contained in any data file in Military Flight Operation Quality Assurance System, the Military Department from release Freedom of Information Act pursuant to Section 22548, Title 10 United States Code. Directorate Oversight Compliance, Authority Direction Control, Chief Management Officer, Director of Oversight Compliance, Assistant Chief Management Officer carrying out responsibility, Department of Defense, Chief Freedom of Information Officer, Services, Freedom of Information, affiliated to Foia, under Office of Secretary of Defense, Office of Chairman of Joint Staff, DoD Field Activity Combat Commands, Account, appoints official who serves, Freedom of Information Act, Public Liaison, Office of Secretary of Defense, Office of Chairman, Joint Chief of the Staff of DoD Field Activities of Combat Commands, provides Freedom of Information Act training opportunities for the DoD to include regular holding and training workshop. Director, Washington Headquarters Services, under Authority, Direction, Control, Chief Management Officer, Director, Washington Headquarters Services, Administration, Freedom of Information Act Program, Office of Secretary of Defense, Officer of Chief Joint Staff, DoD Field Activities. 2-4, General Counsel of the Department of Defense. The Counsel of the Department of Defense ensure that the Office of Secretary of Defense, legal advisors, public affairs officers, legislative affairs officers are aware or release litigation channels that may be significant in public media, congressional interest, or interest to senior DoD official. Establish centralized Freedom of Information Act and litigation documents where deemed necessary, and provide legal advice, Freedom of Information Act compliance. DoD Freedom of Information Act Program Components Heads and Program Component Heads. Administrative DoD Freedom of Information Act Program with component to include publishing any additional guidance necessary for the implementation of the directive. When dealing with freedom of information release that may be significant public or media congressional interest over the interest senior with the DoD official with the ensure of the Freedom of Information Act request or service center with the provided advice and notification, respective chain of command, legal counsel, public and affairs officer with the legislative and affairs. Others release included release through the litigation channel provided Department of Director of Oversight Compliance. With advance notification, proposed response, coordination with legal counsel. Paragraph does not apply to Inspector General of the Department of Defense. Conducting training provision, Freedom of Information Act, Part 286, Title 32, Code of Federal Regulation, DoD Manual 5400-07, Component Personnel. DoD Freedom of Information Act Program Content. Components head except for the Combat Commander of the DoD Freedom Information Act Program components, except for the combat components and services, appoint another component official with the Component Freedom of Information Affiliated Authority. Acronyms: Chief Management Officer with the Department of Defense, Director of Oversight Compliance, Freedom of Information Act, United States Code. Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act, DoD Information Collection Manual. Procedures for DoD internal information collections. I guess that's the whole 7 pages on the Department of Directive 5400-07, the Department of Defense Freedom of Information Act program.